Hi there, spinning friends. It is time for the newest edition of Ask Sarah. So, 2 weeks ago, I asked you guys to leave me comments in the comment section and to ask me questions that you wanted answered. And then I gave you guys 2 weeks to do it, which you guys did beautifully. And here we are again. So what's going to happen is I'm going to answer those questions from the last video in today's episode. Now, what your job is to ask more questions on today's episode. So leave me comments in the comment section below for new questions of things that you guys want to know. There may be more questions, there may be no more questions. I don't know. We'll find out when we get there in 2 weeks. All right, so I'd like to try to keep this train rolling of you guys asking questions and me coming back to respond to you guys. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and I have the comments pulled up here on my iPad, and I'm going to go through them, the questions with you guys, and answer them to the best of my ability. And then we will go on to the next video. All right. These are in no particular order. They're just from the bottom of the list to the top of the list as it appears on my iPad. I don't think it is in sequential order. It's just randomized. All right. So the first one on my list is from Julie. And she says, I struggle with starting when I spin on my Turkish spindle. I know I have to start the twist on my own to get it fast into the spindle, but I struggle with it. What would your advice be? All right, so I have a video out there about starting a leader on your Turkish spindle. But what I recommend doing is taking the shaft out of your Turkish spindle, okay? And here, let's grab some fluff down here. Grab the end of your fiber and do a little bit of twisting with your hand. All right, so you're gonna grab some fiber and just twist it with your hand so it kind of compresses and it's easy to stick up into the center of your spindle, and then shove it through this hole like this. We're going to use our shaft to scoop it out. All right, so here you go. We've got a nice little lump here that we can then trap with our shaft. So we're going to trap that. Now you have all this unspun fiber. All right, so take your fiber without adding any twist and just draft. And you can actually put your spindle down on a table or something and draft and draft. You're not adding any twist yet, but you kind of want this area to be the same thickness roughly until you're a little bit longer than your spindle shaft. Now, grab your fiber supply up here where the thin spot meets the thick spot, and don't try to spin this like you would a normal drop spindle. You're going to do this all supported. Okay, so you're going to take your spindle and manually roll this in your hand like this. And all you're doing is slowly adding twist. Then you can undo it. I'm pulling, it's not coming apart. And that is your leader. And now you are ready to continue spinning just like this, without having to do anything fancy and without having to use commercial yarn or other hand spun yarn to make your leader. It's just already connected because you did the hard work on getting it to connect. So I have another video on how to start a leader on your Turkish spindle. I suggest that you go check that video out. If you still have questions, come back and let me know. I can film another video if everything is not clear enough. All right. Let's see. I think it's Kiara, Q-U-I-A-R-A, wants to know who are my current favorite spindle makers. They've been out of the spindle acquiring for a bit and is mostly a support spindle. So she's not sure who's making the good stuff these days. All right. So I have gone through a lot of spindles in my time of spinning. Originally I had nothing but Texas Jeans spindles. He doesn't do spindles anymore. They were really, really great spindles. You can catch them on D-Stash. Then I moved, for support spindles, I moved to Silly Salmon. Ken and Marilyn, really, really good people. Love them. They have excellent spindles with a really, really nice, not harmful metal tip on the tip end of their spindles. They spin for a really good long time. He does wonderful work with coloring them. They're getting a little hard to get, so you're going to need to stock, but it's on Etsy, and that is Silly Salmon Designs. You can also get really excellent support spindles from Enid Ashcroft. I'm pretty sure that's her name. She's overseas in the UK. Really nice spindles. I have had a couple of hers in the past. Right now, my current obsession and pretty much the only support spindles that I have as I'm sitting here looking at them is Woodland Handcrafts. Woodland Carl does amazing work on his spindles. They are some of the best that I've ever spun. Also, his updates are kind of like the Wild West. You've got to be the first to shoot in order to get your spindle from him, but it's definitely worth stalking, signing up for his stock free pass on his Ravelry page. They're beautiful. They spin for forever. His are the only Tibetan spindles, the ones with the bigger whorls on the bottom, that I can spin on, because despite the fact that they have a chunkier whorl, they are still lightning fast. And the way that I spin requires a really fast spindle, because that way I'm not waiting for twist to enter my singles. If you're looking for drop spindles, 100%, I only spin on Turkish spindles for drop spindles, with one exception. And that is the only top whorl spindle that I have ever been able to spin on with any kind of relative success is Bosworth spindles. They're amazing. And probably the reason why I get along with them so well is because their featherweights are super lightweight. And I have some inflammation issues, so I have to have lightweight spindles, and I never spend more than a half an ounce on my spindles, so they stay lightweight. They have beautiful woods. They have really simple woods. You can get them anytime. You can contact Sheila Bosworth. They have a Ravelry group as well that you can contact her directly, and they do their things a little bit differently, where you actually have to email and she will send you a spindle. If you're a stickler like I am, she is willing to send you photos, but for the most part, it's a trust thing. So you say, hey, I'm really interested in this red cedar spindle, and I'm looking for something unusual, something kind of different than the regular run-of-the-mill red cedar, and she will send you absolutely beautiful spindles all day long. As far as Turkish spindles go, I have used several. My original ones were from Subterranean Woodworks, but he is no longer doing those. If you can see them up here, my row of Turkish spindles that I have up here are from the Jenkins Woodworking. Amazing spinners. Again, I only go with one particular size of their spindles because of weight. They are also kind of hard to get. You have to really stalk the D-stashes and their Ravelry page to see if you can catch an update that way. 3D printed spindles via Turtle Made 3D are excellent, inexpensive spindles that you can use. They are just as good as any other spindle. They're just 3D printed. Don't leave them in your car in the summer, but beautiful spindles, do exactly what you need them to do, and won't break the bank. Words are hard today. So I hope that answers your question. Those are my favorites. Everybody's mileage is variable. You're going to have to, unfortunately, try and see some spindle makers to see who you like and who you prefer. Angie says, hi, Sarah. I've always been interested in spinning, but have had no one to help me get started. Yeah, me too. I'm slowly getting familiar with terms in regard to tools and fiber prep, but is there a good book to read or reference that you can recommend? Thanks. I'm glad I found your channel. First of all, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Thank you. As far as, there's not really books to read that I have. The books that I have are Spinning and Dyeing Yarn, which, yes, it's fine. It's not anything to write home about. I have Hand Dyeing Yarn, which is not going to help you at all. And then I have the Spinner's Book of Yarn Design. And that really just tells me, once I'm an established spinner, how to spin specific yarns, which can be very good. But the best reference material that I can give you is Ravelry. There are lots of beginner spinners groups. There's a group that I'm a part of called the Spinning Circle. We have been talking to new spinners time out of mind. So you go onto Ravelry if you can, if you are able, and look up, different groups on beginning spinning or spinners. You can always just type in spinning into the group search and see what comes up. There are tons of different spinning groups on Ravelry. Other than that, I would say YouTube is going to be your friend. If it's something that the community would be interested in, I would be more than happy to do a series or workshop or something to that effect of beginning spinning and all the buzzwords that you need to know, whether it's fiber prep or what a whirl is versus what a pulley is, spindle shafts versus wheels. You get the idea. I learned everything that I know about spinning by myself, kind of just like you. Lots and lots of trial and error. The only thing I will say is that I did have Ravelry communities to kind of push me along and help me along the way. So you can do it too. I have faith in you. You can do it too. Let's see. Cindy writes in and says, my question concerns wool processing. I have a 5-pound Clun Cross fleece. I have it scoured, and that's as far as I've gotten. The locks are shortish, around the 3-inch range. I've tried flicking them open. However, there's a lot of fine VM in the center of the locks. I think combing would be a good option to clean out the locks. However, the staple is a bit short. I have combs and hand cards. What would your advice be for the most efficient way to prep them for spinning? First of all, while this isn't strictly a pile of fleece, this is a fleece that I did prep myself. I combed this fiber. But if this were, let's call these 2 locks of your fiber, and you still wanted to comb them, which combing produces a combed hand comb top versus machine comb top, there's no comparison in the world. This kind of hand comb top is going to be like the Rolls Royce of comb top. It is so much nicer to work with. But if this were my fleece and it had a whole bunch of garf and like fine powdery little needles, daggers of VM in the center, I would probably invest in a lock pop. I want to say it's from Clems and Clems, but it's basically just a little block with carding cloth on it that you can take your lock and just pop it through the teeth of the carding cloth, and it will kind of fluff it up even further to allow a lot of that VM to come out. Then you can take that fluffed up lock and load it onto your hand combs, and comb it. A 3-inch fleece is totally combable. That's totally fine. If you are not married to the idea of combing it and you want to card it, and this was my lock that I needed to get all the VM out of, I would do this and tease the lock apart using your fingers until it is a lovely, fluffy little cloud, and just keep pulling and pulling and pulling, just like this, until you have something that resembles this. And once you have something that resembles this, then because you have hand cards, you can take this and load it like this, kind of like you're you're dragging your hair through a comb, you would put that onto the cards just like that and then card it as you normally would. It's going to make a beautiful carded fiber. 3 inches is totally cardable too. So I don't think you can go wrong with either prep. And how you handle the VM depends on which prep you choose. You can probably pop your locks without buying a lock pop. I think it's called a lock pop. You would just have to kind of sit like this and put your hand card like into your leg so you could then pop it on the hand carder. It's going to do the exact same thing. It's going to take that really condensed, not just condensed lock and fluff it out and make it really open and help get the bigger pieces of VM out. And then when you start combing it, the combs are going to take most of the rest of it out. But also, as you are drafting your fiber, a lot of it is going to fall out that way too. So I wouldn't worry too much about the really, really fine stuff, because for the most part, it's just going to fall out as you're prepping the fiber. Okie dokie. L. Glassen says, thank you for opening up your video series to questions. I'm a new supported spindler and I'm curious if you find any major differences in how you spin various preps. Of course, the prepping process and how we hold the fiber will differ, but are there any differences for you during the spindling process? Thank you. All right, so yes. When I spin from the fold, I've done a video fairly recently about spinning from the fold. I take my finger out of the fiber and I spin only staple lengths of fiber at a time. I don't get, large chunks and spin that from the fold. It doesn't work that well for me. I find spinning from the fold will allow me greater control. As far as roving, I spin roving a lot. All I do with that is diz it. You'll have a chunk of fiber that's probably this big around, and I'll diz it till it's about this big around. And once it's that big around, I will just spin and sort of peel back the fiber as I go. I think this is in another one of my videos, but I'll peel back the fiber as I go a little bit, just allowing the fibers to open and catch freely as opposed to having clumps where I have to go back and double draft it. As I find, I'm back. One phone call and a hair change later. All right. Roll lags. I typically do not spin from roll lags. I find them very, very dense and harder to control when drafting. However, I have spun from roll lags from, I guess you would say, indie dyers. And what I have found is similar to roving. I treat it just like roving, and I don't diz the fiber, but like a roll lag is probably this long, and if you squish it, they're pretty dense. So I take my roll lags and I will either just grab a hand width chunk and pull it off, and then use that and then pre-draft that. And I'm not actually dizzing that fiber because I don't think dizzing would work terribly great with that, but I do draft it so it is more like roving instead. And then once I have, this hand-sized chunk that goes into like this long of a piece of fiber, then I spin that. And I generally leave it unbound and just dangling, maybe draped over my arm if I'm spinning from a drop spindle. But then I just spin that. With a support spindle, I sit here when I support spin, and I generally just drape it over the edge of the chair so it doesn't get in my way, and then spin it just like normal. The only thing I will say when I have been spinning from roll lags is because the fiber, when you draft it and when you pre-draft it and when you draft it while you're going, it's generally made from comb to top, and that fiber tends to get knotty and Knotty, at different points for whatever reason. Maybe it's just the way that I spin it. Maybe it's the preparation mixed with the comb top. But I do tend to run into places where the spiral effect creates a knot that I literally have to just like pull off and let go and then rejoin the yarn and do it that way. So that's really the only thing that I think I have to watch out for when I spin Rolex. And like I said, I don't actually spin from proper Rolex very often because I don't find them that enjoyable. I love spinning from faux lags that I've made because when I have a video on that too, and when I make them, I pre-draft my yarn and lay it out and fluff it sideways and then roll it until it's the dowel is covered and pull it off. And I do not spin that in my hand to compact it. I leave it really big and fluffy and just pull it right off the dowel and put it in the box. And those are an absolute joy to spin, even though those are also coming from comb top. So I'm not sure what exactly causes the knots because I don't get them in my faux lags. But those, I mean, the differences are really quite subtle. They don't seem to bother me, and it could just be because I've been spinning for quite a while and I'm just used to the variances of the different fiber types. I hope that answers your question. Let's see. Brittany wants to know, how did I start spinning? I would love to hear about your spinning journey from then until now. Okay. I actually do not remember the catalyst for why I started spinning. It's been 10 years. I have mom brain. I don't remember that far back. But what I did go back and look at my earliest Ravelry posts, and it was pretty much knitting related for like, I don't know, a couple of months. And then all of a sudden it jumped straight into spinning, and has been spinning ever since. And it's been crazy. I do know that I bought a cheap top whorl spindle. It was actually a 2-set. It was a top whorl and a bottom whorl, both drop spindles. And it was misery. If I had given up at that point, there would be no Spinning Sara. There would be no, none of what I have in this room would be here because I would not be a spinner. But my wonderful husband allowed me to buy a spinning wheel, sight unseen, because I have no really good spinning resources around me. I don't have a local spinning shop or a local yarn shop or anything kind of like that maybe I should start one. Nothing to kind of help me get going. But I did watch YouTube, and at the time I was listening to the Knitmore girls, and Jasmine was hosting a spin along knit along, and it was really intriguing to me. And so I bought a Kiwi 2, I think off of Amazon, believe it or not. And it came in, and I spent a day just treadling, and then I spent a day with a commercial leader on a bobbin and just learning how to feed it on and then ripping it right back off. And then I fell headfirst into spinning, and the first 8 months of my spinning career was all on that wheel. And that was great because I learned how to draft, and I didn't have to worry so much about spindles falling and having to rejoin all the time, which seems silly because even with a wheel, you have to rejoin. But I don't know. I think I was trying to run before I was able to walk with the spindle. So I was not willing to park my spindle, like spin the spindle, gather the twist, park it, and then draft out. I wasn't willing to do that. Again, running before walking. So for some reason, the wheel clicked with me. And so I was able to quickly get the hang of that and gain the drafting skills that I needed. Then what happened was around the 8-month mark, I'm pretty sure that was Tour de Fleece. And that would have been Tour de Fleece 2014. And I jumped in. I bought a supported spindle from Texas Jeans. And that was the end. I was a spindle spinner. I branched out further from there to Turkish spindles. And I was convinced that Turkish spindles and Russian supported spindles were the only ones that I could use. I was waiting too long on Tibetan spindles for the twist because of how I spin, and Russians just gave me that really fast burst that I needed for my spinning type. And Turkish spindles just worked for me. I bought a subterranean woodworking spindle, and that took straight off. And I'm attributing all of this to the fact that I already knew how to draft from working on a wheel. So it wasn't the drafting that was holding me back anymore. It was just the mechanics of which hand was I going to use, which way did I turn the spindle, how did I wind those on, those kind of things. And it wasn't for, gosh, I would say 5 years of spinning with spindles that I was finally able to try a Bosworth spindle to be able to do top whirls. And now I can pretty much spin on any spindle that you throw at me. I have medieval spindles, the stick spindles with the crystal or rock whorls. I can spin on any kind of spindle now, and it doesn't faze me at all. Maybe if I was to get like a kick spindle, that would probably be a little difficult for me, and not because of the drafting part, because that I can do in my sleep, but it would be the physical mechanics of using that spindle until I get comfortable with it. But I was convinced very early on that there was no way I was going to spin, because that's just crazy and those people are crazy. Well, I drank the crazy Kool-Aid, and I said the exact same thing about weaving, and now I am not weaving all that often, but I do have a loom and I weave, and I was convinced that I was not going to do that either. So yeah, if I say I'm not going to do something, you can pretty much be sure that I'm going to convince myself to do it. Let's see, Twilight Knitter writes in and says, first, I love your videos. Thank you. That's so sweet. I'm returning back to spinning after a long hiatus and developed a deep love for spindle spinning. I was recently trying to spin across the top of the braid to manage the colors. I've done that on a wheel, though it's been a while, but struggled on the spindle. She's using a Turkish spindle, and if you're managing the colors and you're trying to spin across the top of your fiber, let's see. Aha, here. I have this blue braid. It's not been broken up. And often what I do is the first thing that I do when I get a braided fiber is I split it in half long ways, because I personally do not like to deal with this much fiber. It's too much for me. I would much prefer to have half as long color runs because I split the fiber in half than to deal with, bigger than my hand, wider or as wide as my hand, long ways worth of fiber. However, if you are determined to not split your fiber because you want really long color runs, in my drafting video, I talk about this, but your fiber supply hand is like a trapdoor, and where you hold your fiber matters. And if you can see this is where I usually hold my fiber. This down here is held really lightly, and honestly, I don't have to hold it there at all. It's just for my own comfort. But if you use 3 fingers, okay, and move your thumb as you go, you're going to lock off certain places where your thumb is and open up the rest. So if I try to draft right here, it's not going to come. But if I try to draft over here, it's going to come just fine. So basically, as you're spinning on your spindle, you want, and you're maintaining this thickness of a fiber supply. First of all, make sure it doesn't flay out and it doesn't roll open, because if you take a look at this fiber, all combed top is made up of pencils. Okay, so you could take this and break this right here and right here and right here and right here and right here, and probably, even though this one isn't open, right here. There's generally about 8 of these. This one looks like it has 7, but it's the same basic principle. You can split this down easily into 7 or 8 pieces without really having to fuss and fight too much, because of how they start off with 1, and then they spin a whole bunch of ones, and then they slowly add them back together when they're making a combed top, a commercial combed top. And this is part of the reason why homemade hand combed top is so much more enjoyable to spin than a piece of commercially prepared combed top, because you're not adding a whole bunch of pieces together and smooshing them and trying to make them all be one. It is just one because you are personally combing it. Anyway, you're having trouble drafting across, so you need to use your fingers as gatekeepers. And if you want to, not everybody can go back and forth, okay? Let me qualify that. Everybody can go back and forth across the top of their fiber. It's how easily you can do it yourself. So when I say not everybody can do it, what I mean is not everybody likes to spin this way and then do nothing with their fiber and go back the other way. It's more of a comfort thing than it is a mechanics thing, because the mechanics are the same. All you're doing is moving your fingers and where you're pressing as you go across the fiber, and that will gatekeep the fiber and force your fiber to draft in a certain direction. So if you're over here and you want to draft over here, you want to close off this area by pinching it, and that will naturally, as long as you're maintaining the braid and keeping it nice and cohesive, it will force the fibers to draft from the easier spot. Fibers are no different than people. They want to come from the easiest spot. So if you're drafting from here and you want to come over here, all you have to, and continuously move your finger as you go. So it would be something sort of like this, and those are big jumps, and you would make much smaller jumps. But the principle is the same. It's kind of the same thing as when you're spinning on a wheel, how you are moving and manipulating your fiber supply, or even your wrist, to make the fiber do what you want it to do. You can do the exact same thing on a drop spindle. But on a drop spindle, specifically a Turkish spindle, because it's way down there, right? It may be easier for you, and because it's going straight down, to spin down your top and then flip it and spin down your top again. And that way you're not fighting gravity, right? You're not trying to make something up here draft when you are down here. It's easier to draft down when you're drop spindling. That would be my suggestion. I do have a video on drafting across the top of your fiber on a Turkish spindle. Go check that out. If it's not clear enough or you need more information, come back and let me know, and I can do another video or talk to you personally. Okay. Petara writes in and says, I really like your idea of answering questions. Thank you. Do you prep some of the fibers you spin? And if so, do you use spinning oil for your fiber in order to make the fibers glide more easily among each other? No. The only prep that I do for my fibers, it really depends on the spin. Certain colors I want to keep very long color runs, and some I want really short color runs. When I tend to spin for socks, because I'm already going to be spinning very fine, I tend to do the thing where I split the fiber into its individual pencils, and that way the fiber supply that I'm working with is much thinner, and it's much easier to draft finer quicker, in my opinion, when you're doing it that way. Also, most of the socks that I knit are for my husband, and we collectively prefer shorter color runs in his socks. So that's what I do for that. However, the only other thing that I do to prep fiber is diz it. And that's generally only when I'm spinning from bats. And I only do that because, similar to a braid of fiber, where I don't like dealing with a big wide chunk, roving is exactly the same way. Carded bats are producing roving, and they're very, very wide. And even if you were to chunk them, the chunks are still pretty wide. So I take a chunk of a bat and I will diz it and make it a fraction of the size. And that's all that I do. Sometimes I'll make faux lags out of my comb top, but that's pretty rare anymore. So that's all the prepping that I do, period. I have never used spinning oil on fibers. I have heard of people that do use it, but theirs have generally been a mixture of like leave-in conditioner and water that they just put in a spray bottle. And I think it's more to control the static electricity in their fiber than it is ease of spinning. Certain fibers lend themselves more towards static electricity, and I've only really found static electricity to be a problem where I am when I am hand combing fleece, and as soon as I go through it, it just goes woof, and I don't really worry about it. I just keep combing it and then go back the other way and lash it back on. Once I'm ready to pull it off, I smooth it all down with my hands. So your hands naturally have oils on them anyway. I have never like sprayed my fiber or anything like that. So I've never used it, but I know that there are people who do. Some people swear by it. Some people, like me, could care less and don't use it at all. So no, I do not have experience doing that. Okay, Susan loves the idea of question and answers. Thank you, Susan. Please ask me another question this week. Her question relates to spinning fractal yarns, or trying to. I see pictures of such lovely fractal yarns, but mine just doesn't look so nice. Do you have any suggestions, hints, or tips, please? It depends on how it doesn't look nice. I pulled 3 of my one fairly old spin and 2 within the last year. All of these spins I would consider fractals. This spin, and I will insert a picture of this yarn close up so you guys can see it close up. This yarn was a Corriedale. Corriedale is not something that I usually spin. It was from Hello Yarn, and I loved the colors, and I felt like the colors would mix together in a really pleasing way because there was contrast between them, but it wasn't insane contrast. And I think the most successful fractal yarns are ones that have sufficient contrast without being crazy contrast. So this one is a mixture of blues and greens and browns, and I think because of its similar, cooler end of the spectrum color palette, it works really well for a fractal. All I did with this was I split the fiber into 4 long pieces, and then I broke those 4 long pieces in half. And really, you need to look at your fiber. The different dyers dye fibers in different ways. Some fiber dyers go with really short repeats. 1 second, and I will show you what I'm talking about. All right, I have 2 different, well, this is a partial braid because this is one that I'm actively spinning. But if you look at this, you can see how these colors line up within a pretty short span. It's going to go to this blue before it turns back again. But there are a lot of these repeats in this fiber. And I guess you could argue that it's even shorter than I'm thinking it is. It bends at the pink and it bends at the blue, and it goes back to green and then yellow and orange. So it's kind of like a pastel-y-ish rainbow, but these repeats are very, very short. So the easiest way for you to fractal something like this, especially if the ends are different, which the ends of this braid were different, you could simply spin them like this, just one end to one end. And as long as the colors don't match too frequently, like this, they're gonna maybe overlap right here, but this would be an excellent fractal because the colors aren't going to overlap very much. You would want to, my favorite fractals are 2-ply fractals. I have a 3-ply fractal that I can show you. This is a braid of fiber from Three Waters Farm. And Marianne dyes absolutely beautiful yarns or fibers. It starts with this really, really bright blue and goes into a much deeper, almost navy. And then it goes into green and chartreuse maybe, almost yellow, orange, very bright pink. And then we're back to a purpley blue and then a navy-ish green and then almost like a teal green at the very, very bottom. So if you were to take this braid of fiber and just flip it and spin it end to end, it's not going to fractal so nicely because you have a lot of similar tones, very similar. This is going to be more of a semi-solid down here where this is going to go crazy. So with Marianne's braids, what I do generally, and what I did with this yarn, is you can do a 3-ply with this and take 2 of these and spin them just as they come. And then the other one you would take and spin the other way from the bright blue down to the teal, and that's going to reverse 1 ply of your yarn. That's going to make something that looks kind of like this. I did that with this fiber. This was not a Three Waters Farm braid, but this has 2 plies that go together in parallel, and then the other ply goes backwards, and the color schemes go backwards. So that's where you can see the marling happening in this one. It's going to be less dramatic, but I think it would knit up beautifully. We'll find out when I knit socks with it. I also have another braid of, this one was Three Waters Farm. This one was called Stone House. And I want to say with this one, what I did was, and this is probably the best way for, if you're looking for a less scientific fractal yarn where you're not like saying, okay, I'm going to take this thing and break it right here and that's that. If you're looking for just a crazy hodgepodge kind of yarn, that is what I did that's what I did with this yarn. And if you go on Instagram, you can see amazing fractal yarns. And I am willing to bet that a lot of them do it in this method. And what I did was I took this braid and I broke it in half, short, whatever. I can't talk. I broke it in half this way, like this, okay? Then I took those two halves and broke them in half again. So you have quarters of your colorway, right? Then after you've taken your braid and broken it into 4 pieces, then I stripped it down into its individual pencils. And stripping it down into its individual pencils is going to give you shorter color runs, which is going to help it mix together. And if you do it sort of like this, where you split it in half and then do it in half again, and then do it in half again, you're going to have really small pieces of fiber, but it's going to be shorter color runs. Now, because this was a fraction of a braid, the little piece that I'm going to show you is really small. But you just take it and wrap it up into its own little fiber knot. And again, this is going to be much bigger when you would do it because I'm dealing with much smaller pieces. But you take these and you just chuck them into a basket or into a bowl or whatever, and then you grab them at random and spin them. And that way you are not likely to ever have color matching. I would be really surprised if there was a point where this like raspberry pink meets raspberry pink. If pink meets pink, it's generally the lighter pink and the darker pink meeting together. There really isn't any like bold stripe of single color in this yarn because I spun this one in that method where I just stripped the braid all to crazy and shook it up really good when I put it in the bowl and spun it like that. That is probably the best answer that I have for you as to how to spin a fractal yarn better, is to really break your braid down, look at how the colorway works, look where the color repeats are. You could even, for a braid like this from Nest, you could find the repeat, right? So we know that pinks repeat to, I think pinks repeat. Yeah, pinks repeat to the golds. So these are not very long color repeats, but if you find, you could take this part and break it and spin this part as this own color repeat, and then take this part and break it here in the center and then spin backwards from each one, and it changes, it breaks the color repeats, allowing the colors to mix and harmonize better when they're not side by side and they're not matching up at all. I hope that helps. Kay writes in and says, thank you for your help that you've given me previously. I still can't seem to spin a yarn that is soft to the touch. Any suggestions? This is our last question, guys. We did it. Yay. I actually answered Kay last week in a video. And I did message her and tell her specifically that I was answering her question in its own separate video. And it's the video 24.3 where we talk about twist. And basically what I'm gathering from a private conversation that I've had with Kay is that she is spinning yarns, but when she is spinning them, she is putting too much twist in her singles. Then when she goes to ply, she is putting too much twist in her ply. So here's what I've found over the years. You can either do low twist singles with high ply twist, or you can do high singles twist and low ply twist. One thing has to give. You can't do both. You can do both, but it's not going to be a soft, fluffy, it's not going to be squishy and feel good against your skin and feel good, and it's not going to handle well. It's going to be very, very sturdy yarn, that's for sure. But it's not going to be a joy running through your fingers as you work with it. I personally spin low twist singles. And when I say low twist, I mean lower than I've seen most people spin. When I wind on my bobbins, when I'm spinning on a wheel, there are no crazy pigtails coming off of my bobbins because of the twist that is built up in my singles. That does not happen for me because I purposefully spin my singles on low ratios. They don't pull apart. I still do my tug test. They just hold together, and that's it. I don't ask anything more of my singles than that they hold together. They need to hold together under the tug of the wheel when it's winding on. And I'm a bit of a tension princess when it comes to wheels, so my wheel tension is always extremely low. But they hold together, and they also hold together when I ply my yarns, and I use a high ply twist. You need to have just enough twist in your singles to be able to untwist a little bit as you ply. A traditional 2-ply has less untwist than a chain ply. Chain ply always needs more twist than a traditional 3-ply. It's going to take practice, but I know you guys can do it. So I want my yarns to have twist. This one's probably better. Twist that looks like this. I want my, Judith McKenzie said that when you ply your yarn, it should look like a string of pearls. There should be definite bumps, but the bumps should be right beside each other. They should not be hanging out gaping. Okay, I've seen some, for lack of a kinder term, I've seen some truly atrocious yarns. And I am not trying to toot my own horn because I have spun some of those truly atrocious yarns. Everybody does when they're learning something. I don't spin art yarn because I can't seem to get the hang of it, and my art yarns look like barf. But I can spin a very consistent yarn, and my yarns are always, I strive for a tighter ply. Tighter plies are also going to be very, very helpful when you're doing sock yarns. I still spin my singles low twist, but my ply twist for a sock yarn is a little bit more than my ply twist for a non-sock yarn. I only spin superwash merino for socks, and so I also use these Tyvek wrist bands that you would get at like a concert or something. They are waterproof, so I write my fiber dyer, the name of the colorway, how many yards it is, what the fiber content is. I always know what my fiber is because I use these. So whenever I pull a braid out, I know exactly what it is. Like, this is the Corriedale from Hello Yarn. This is a superwash merino. This is destined to be socks one day. Because I know it's a superwash merino, and I know that when I spun this, I spun it with socks in mind. Not every project is like that. I spun this for the joy of spinning it. I did not have a particular goal in mind, but I also knew that this was a Polworth silk, and it's not destined to be socks. It will never be socks because I'm not going to make socks that have to be delicately washed. It's just not something that I do. So next week, Lord willing, I'm going to put out the second part of the twist conversation, and that is ply twist. I'm going to have examples of what not to do and examples of what you should be doing. If you want consistent, evenly plied, squishy yarns. So Kay, thank you for your question, and thank all of you for your questions. They were brilliant. I hope to be able to answer some more questions in 2 weeks. So keep them coming. You guys are doing awesome. And I hope this makes sense about twist, because you want enough twist for your yarn to hold together, and that's it for singles. So many people crank up the tension on their wheels and can't understand why they're getting pigtails. And you're getting pigtails because you have to spin a tighter twist yarn if you have your tension pulled up super high, because your yarn's just going to fly away if you're not putting extra twist into it. So if you're spinning on a wheel, you want your tension to only be tight enough to get the bobbin to wind yarn on, and that's it. If you're spinning on a Scotch tension wheel, you might have to adjust that halfway through your spin, because as the bobbin gets heavier, it requires more pressure to wind on. But because your core of your bobbin is thicker at that point, you're not going to notice the increase in tension. If you guys are interested in videos about spinning wheels and spinning wheel mechanics, and more teaching videos about how to spin on a spinning wheel, please leave me a comment and let me know, because for the most part, I just do spindles. Even with a drop spindle, you can overspin a yarn, and quite quickly, if you are not managing how much twist you're putting into your yarn. If you're thigh spinning and you're getting to the end of your single and your spindle hasn't slowed down, that's probably going to be an overspun yarn, because when you do your ply back test, your ply is going to go, it's going to suck in real fast. You kind of want your ply back to be a little lazy, a little. And we'll talk about ply twist next week. Guys, thank you so much for your very, very good questions. I'm loving answering these questions. It's making me really think about things before I talk to you guys about it. So I really appreciate your questions. Please keep them coming. I would love to continue doing this with you guys. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. And if you have already subscribed, thank you so much, and possibly consider becoming a channel member. We would greatly appreciate that. And when I say we, I mean me. Keep thinking of those questions, post them in the comment section down below, and I will see you guys on the next one. Happy spinning.